How do you change when you learn how to use the tool of violence? When you train for your self-protection, are there changes that happen within you? Well, I'm going to discuss that today. You're going to be surprised. There's some really positive aspects to learning how to protect yourself that you probably haven't thought of nor experienced if you haven't trained yet. And hopefully this will motivate you to seek out some training. Also, you're going to get lots of other information. We're going to talk about, the difference between men and women, how they look at things. You're going to learn specifically how to go after the eye to blind somebody. So I'm show you step by step, how a client of mine had to use this information. And we're going to discuss just what happens to you, how you learn physically and how it affects you mentally after in some unique and positive ways. So I really hope you enjoy this because, again, I don't think these subjects are talked about enough. And again, during this interview that I had with the Business Outlaws, these guys really asked some great questions. And so I just wanted to share it with you and then get your comments. So before I do, though, please subscribe to the channel, share the channel, hit the comments, hit the notification, and just keep growing this channel because I'm telling you, I'm really enjoying this. And I look forward to continue to give you great information on your self-protection. All right, so let's get to the video.
People who have jobs and stuff in violent jobs, or they're familiar with extreme violence, that they treat other human beings socially a lot nicer.
Yeah, I've always said the most highly trained individuals that I know when it comes to using lethal force, and this is on the non-criminal side. So I'm taking out of everybody from and we can talk about those guys later, the prison systems. But I found on the civilian, on the good guy side, the more highly trained somebody is. And even I'm in Vegas, and so I deal with a lot of the UFC fighters, and a lot of the guys are friends of mine. And I count that, even though that's a different type of violence, those guys are great. But the better they are, usually the most calm and just cool guys that they are. They're very confident. They're not arrogant about it. Most of the special operators that I know you'd never even know. You'd never even know they're special operations guys. When they come on, they're really low key. And that confidence comes from saying, okay, I've studied the problem. I look at it. I know I know what my abilities are, and I also know the reality of violence. The reality of violence is basically whoever gets the first injury most likely is going to be the one walking away. And that's actually pretty good news. It sounds intimidating at first, but that's a 50-50. Most people, as it stands today, most civilized people, they have less than a 10-90 against a real predator now. But if you can bring it up to a 50-50 where whoever gets the first injury, you're doing great work at that point.
I would imagine when you have those skills too, it's going to transfer over in all areas of your life, not in that one dangerous situation, but how you interact with everybody, because you're going to have this extra gear of confidence that you normally never had before. As you said, more tools in the toolbox.
Yeah, there's this weird thing too, where I tell people all the time, like when they train with us, the majority we try to keep it 90% training on the mat, on the time, because that's where the real learning happens, the kinesthetic awareness. And the byproduct of that, from actually doing the training and physically going through the work, there's another level of learning that happens, that kinesthetic learning, that just, by touching other areas of the human body, going through and doing all that stuff, you all of a sudden it happens. You just have a different feeling about yourself. You're not as concerned. I was talking about one of the guys earlier, and a lot of times people are really, especially if they have no training whatsoever, they imagine it to be much worse than a physical confrontation, to be much worse than it is. I mean, it can be very bad, don't get me wrong, but oftentimes it's not that bad to get hit. It's not that bad. Very few people actually know how to injure the human body correctly. And you'll find that people, once they have a little bit of physical training, it goes a long way for their confidence, because they realize, hey, I'm still here. Everything didn't collapse, and actually I was able to do one or two things. That's good to know, So yeah, the more highly trained you are,
I guess
the interesting feedback
I'm talking about that is you won't look like a predator, you're not going to look like a victim when you're walking down the street, because one thing the predators do is they recognize victims. There's a look that they're going for, and if you match that profile, guess what? You're the target. So I'd imagine with this skill set, you're going to be, like I said, totally different on the street, and people are going to see you different as well.
Yeah, probably one of the biggest modifications that I see people make a change of is how they interact with their smartphones after the training. Because I hit them with. In fact, I'll probably use the video later this week. There's a great video that I have of a Seattle bus robbery, and a guy is literally walking down the middle of the bus with a 45, and he's just randomly, going from person to person, taking their iPhones, taking whatever they has, and
everyone's got their headphones.
And everybody's lost, literally, just in their phones on the whole thing. If I didn't have the video, you wouldn't believe me. You'd call bullshit on me. You said, "There's no way this happened." So he gets like 6 people, and then when he gets to this next kid, he's there. The kid's literally on his phone like this. He sees the gun, really put in his face. The kid goes up. And you see, he just bucks up like this real quick. He recognizes it. He redirects the gun, which was good. He did really good. In his other hand, he has his phone. And so he redirects it. He charges the guy down the aisle. And, you look at it and you go, oh, great. He's going to use his phone. He's going to bludgeon him, and he's going to hit him. No. He's sitting there. And again, it's Seattle, so he has like an overcoat on. He's pushing the guy. Now, this is a gun that's in his face. He's pushing the gun. He's taking the phone. And he's putting it in because he doesn't want to crack the screen,
Wow.
That's how much these things have taken over our existence. That we're even this guy like faced with life or death.
Zero situational awareness because of the
luckily
phones.
it worked out, for everybody. But that to me is one of probably the big teaching moments for everybody, saying the technology is amazing. It's not going anywhere. We just need to be aware of what it does to us. We literally give up 2 awareness systems, our hearing and our sight. Willingly, in public areas, and that's what predators look for.
Right. So a lot of these folks out there, they should look at themselves, not just, okay, that's a bad person, and you got to protect me from the bad person. You got to look at yourself and say, hey, like, I need to learn these skills. This is something that I need in my toolbox as a man or woman, because without it, I'm not truly safe or secure.
Yeah, well, what happens is once you go through the training and you see what it takes to survive a violent situation, what's really weird is for me, and like I said, I've been doing it for over 2 decades now, is to see the change in people and what they do, meaning the behavioral changes, because they inherently know I've been taking risks. I basically tell everybody my job, if somebody comes and trains with me, my job is to basically make sure that you stop sleeping with your head on the railroad track. Whatever you're doing, there's something you're doing in your life that you think is a low level risk, but that's just because the train hasn't come. Meaning, it's kind of convenient. I'm here by the train track. I'm just gonna put my head on here. It's kind of comfortable. It holds my shoulder upright. You give yourself all these excuses why, why do I go to the ATM at 10:30 at night? There's no reason for me to do it.
With headphones on, listening to my
it's just, I've got away with it. Yeah. And then I start telling myself these I should be able to do that. I hear this from women all the time, like they want to run at night with their headphones on. And I understand it. And in a perfect world, they're absolutely right. They should be able to run unmolested on there. I just look at it from the idea of, we're dealing with the real world. Yeah. You're profiling as a really easy victim for me. Because you're giving up, some senses, and I can use that to to my advantage. And you see these guys, and time again, a lot of these predators, they don't want a fight. They don't want anything hard. They're looking for an easy victim. Yeah. They're looking for something. And most of these girls that the women that have trained with me and come through or have had to deal with, these guys watch them for weeks. These predators.
Watch them for weeks, because people don't realize that. Yeah. Like, they're being studied and stalked. Talk more about that.
Well, that's just it. Meaning, most of these guys are very methodical. When they're doing it, especially if it's a sexual assault or something like that. There are some crimes of passion and there are some opportunistic things, but a lot of this stuff, like the one girl I talk about in the book, she literally was like the Reese Witherspoon character in Legally Blonde. She was just hilarious, and she was on this cruise, and the last thing she wanted to do was take the self-defense class with her dad. That he made. We did this father-daughter thing. It was a big family cruise, and so the girls, most of them were college age, going off to college, and they did that. So she goes through the training. She wasn't bad. She went through the training fine, and she was really, a good kid about it. But I could tell it was, not her favorite thing to do. I knew her dad fairly well, so I do the course, no big deal. 3 years later, I'm in New York doing one of my seminars, and she traipses in, and she has not only herself, but her 3 little sisters, and they're all, teenage years. And she came up to me. She goes, I don't know if you remember me. I go, yeah, of course. How's your dad doing? She goes, oh, great. She goes, you didn't hear. And I said, no. She said, oh. She goes, well, I just want to tell you. She said, I was attacked, and but it's okay, And then she tells me the story. So she was in a college. She was living in a dorm on the first floor with her roommate. They would leave their windows open, unlocked all the time. The roommate would spend at least 3 nights a week at the boyfriend's apartment. And they had this pattern, and the girl had a bed that was one of those college type beds that, you have it looks almost like a bunk bed, but the desk is below it, one of those type of things, just efficiency for the room. So she's on an elevated platform bed. She wakes up one morning about 2:30 in the morning, and this guy's on top of her. Wow. That's how she wakes up. And she said, it was like you were in my ear. She said, the first thing I realized was he's too far away. Because she realized her situation immediately. And this is a girl that hadn't trained in, in like 2.5 years at that point. Wow. And he was there, and he was adjusting. She realizes, okay, he's going to have to try to pull the sheets down. He's going to have to pull his head closer to me. This is literally going on in her head right at that whole time. And sure enough, he did. And he comes down just like we trained, and she latched onto him, and she pulled onto the neck, and she went right into his eye right away, like we had taught. Because she realized,
how deep did she go in that eye?
I teach people. I mean, I'll be real specific about it. I teach people to go down to the second knuckle,
inside
to your duct,
and like you're just scooping it in, right? Like a big old spoon.
So she's almost in his brain.
It goes in. But what's interesting about what we just did, is really huge. I've had people literally pass out from that description,
really,
because they go internal and they see them doing it to themselves.
Jamie's about to pass out.
Well, but what's really interesting about that is, the reason I give such detail like that is because of, when I did the woman's book, Surviving the Unthinkable, the reports I read. So you'd read reports from victims, murder victims, and she would have DNA, she'd have skin underneath her nails from the guy. And then they'd find the perp. If they'd get him a couple days later, sure enough, he'd have scratches all over his face, which tells me what? She could get to her face, but she didn't have any good information.
Yeah.
She didn't know what to do. She didn't want to pierce the plane. So the reason you have to be very descriptive on how you put injury in the human body is because the brain won't go there. Even if you're under risk, the brain won't go there unless it knows what to do and what to expect. The thing that freaks out most people when they go in is you're going to feel the optic nerve in the back and everything. So it kind of like moves around. But the idea is you're there to blind. We're not here to poke the guy in the eye. We want to blind him. And the reason we want to blind him is because when you blind him, it takes away 50% of their vision. But also there's some sympathetic tearing in the other eye. So it basically takes out everything at that point. They can't really see clearly. And their stereoscopic vision's gone. Everybody's pain tolerance is all over the place.
Yeah, some guy's on Oxycontin and he's attacking you. He's not going to feel anything.
So what happened? So she shoved her thumb in the...
Oh, so she shoved her thumb in the eye. And she held on to the back of his neck when she did it because, of course, people violently, go away from somebody attacking their eye. Yeah. Takes her off the bed. She holds on to him. When she comes off, her hand comes out of his eye. Her finger, comes out of the eye. But she didn't mean to do this, but her forearm ends up going across his
sounds like a good move to me.
Throat. And when they dropped on the floor, she had a wood floor in these dorms, and so it was a hardwood floor, and all of her 120 pounds basically landed on his throat. She said she felt she felt the crunch of the cartilage go in there when she hit me, and she felt the guy just kind of like exhale and like go over. She felt like his whole body kind of release. Yeah. And she knew she'd get up and run. That's what she did. She got up, run, screaming down there. By the time they got back and security got back, the guy was asphyxiated already. So he was dead. Yeah. She was fine with it. She understood she was devoid of choice, but she was kicking herself. The reason she had her sisters there, she said, I heard you. Yeah. I heard you talk about situational awareness. I heard you talk about this. We did everything wrong. She said, we left our doors open. We left our windows open. We did all this stuff. And she said, I'm damn lucky I'm here. And I want to make sure my sisters understand this has nothing to do. So, and she was probably one of the most unlikely people. Like whenever I do one of these seminars, with people, I know somebody's going to have to use the information. Yeah. it's never the person that I can pick.
Wow.
You know. Yeah, that's the case. I every time I train, I know somebody in that class is going to have to use the information. And in the almost 3 decades that I've been doing this, I've never been correct in guessing. You know, it's always been a very unlikely person that's needed the tool. But the reason I wanted to share that with you was because we unpacked a lot of things in that. You know, we talked about, you know, what happens, the behavior modifications of people once they train that way. They're positive for the most part. You know, yes, you're a little more aware, and yes, you make better decisions, but it doesn't limit you in any way. It actually leads you to live a much fuller life. And, you know, talking about things all the time isn't necessarily the best way to get things done. You need to physically train. You know, I mean, here on the channel, I'm going to give you a lot of great information and I'm going to do it. But again, this really isn't the physical training portion of it. The physical training portion of the injury, when you learn injury to the human body, the benefit of that is it embeds in your head what you're actually doing to somebody because you understand what the trauma is. But it also tells you, you know, right off, this is not something you ever want to screw around with. This is not anything that, you know, you're going to compete with. This is something that is purely for survival, and it helps you think through when you'd ever use the tool of violence to protect yourself. And that's just invaluable if you have that in your life. It will change the way you look at the subject. It'll change the way you respond to things. You know, I really cannot emphasize enough just how positive it is when you have at least something in the bank. You know, now listen, you don't need to train the rest of your life. You know, look at it as like almost a CPR class. If you understand a little bit about self-defense, it goes a long way on you making better decisions about how you conduct your life. Because why? You don't want to have to use quote unquote self-defense training. You know, that's not the life you want to live. You want to live a life that minimizes that chance. You know, I talk about the idea of sleeping with your head on a railroad track. That's doing things that you're taking unnecessary risks and you're getting away with it. You know, and my goal through these videos, this content that I'm sharing with you, is I want all of you, regardless of whether you train with me or not, you know, read my book or anything. I'm hoping that through these videos, you're going to examine any unnecessary risks you're taking in your life. And then instead of keeping your head on the railroad track, you know, when the train, you know, might come one time, you never have to worry about whether a train is going to come. Why? You've taken your head off the railroad track. So even if the train comes, you're not going to be there. Just a much better way to live. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Looking forward to your comments and your questions. I'll be back with more very soon.